Hitchcock's influence on cinema is unsurpassed. His suspense films have become cinematic classics, from the 40s with classics like Rebecca, Spellbound, Notorious and Rope, and the memorable 50s classics such as Rear Window, To Catch a Thief, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Vertigo, and North by Northwest, and into the 60s with film gems like Psycho and The Birds. However, after The Birds, his popularity would wane somewhat, and audiences lost interest in his films, and Hitch's films weren't making the money at the box office that his previous films had. In an attempt to resurrect his popularity, he decided to return to his homeland of England to make the thriller Frenzy, which is about a man who is wrongfully accused in London for murdering women by strangulation. To clear his name, he goes on a crusade to find the murderer. The film, of course, followed a general theme featured in many of Hitchcock's films. Frenzy was a return to form for Hitchcock, and the film was a moderate success. Even though he was getting on in age, it actually looked like he was making a comeback, and he was planning his next big film project. Family Plot would be Hitchcock's next film, and was a film adapted for the screen by Ernest Lehman, and was based on Victor Canning's 1972 novel, The Rainbird Pattern. Lehman had collaborated previously with Hitchcock as screenwriter on North by Northwest in 1959. He was offered the job as screenwriter for Hitchcock for a number of failed projects, and would decline an offer to write the screenplay for Hitchcock's film project titled No Bail for the Judge, which would be a thriller set in London, which was intended to star Audrey Hepburn and Lawrence Harvey. A screenplay was eventually written and finalised, but the film was never made after Hepburn became pregnant. This would turn out to work for Hitchcock, as he turned to another project, Psycho, in 1960, which was of course a massive hit. After Lehman adapted the 1972 novel The Rainbird Pattern into the film that would become Family Plot, he originally intended the film to be a sweeping, dark and dramatic film, but Hitchcock wanted the film to be a more light-hearted black comedy. Lehman's screenplay for Family Plot would earn him a 1977 Edgar Award. The overall story revolves around Blanche, a fraudulent psychic, and her boyfriend, George, who are hired by an old lady to find her nephew, Arthur, who she had given up for adoption as a boy. With very little information for which to go on, the pair track down a man named Arthur in San Francisco with a colourful past, which includes murder and robbery. He works alongside his partner in crime, girlfriend Fran. After discovering that he is being trailed, he starts to assume that it's for other reasons and starts to target the couple, Blanche and George. Family Plot would originally be titled The 53rd Movie during pre-production. The film's working titles were Missing Air and Deceit. Roy Finnis was originally hired to play Arthur Adamson, but Alfred Hitchcock's first choice was in fact William Devane. After Devane became available, Hitchcock hired him and fired Finnis.
In regard to the actor, that was miscasting on my part. I felt that he was too nice. He didn't have enough sinister quality, and that's how I came to make the change. And I chose a man who was more sinister, who had previously played Robert F. Kennedy.
Hitchcock would regret his decision not to cast Finnis in the role of Arthur, and after the completion and screening of the film, he would turn to star Bruce Dern and say, "I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I?" Originally, in some key scenes and publicity stills shot prior to the film, contained Roy Finnis, not William Devane. The other choices for the role of Arthur were Burt Reynolds and Roy Scheider. For the part of George Lumley, Al Pacino was originally considered during filming because Hitch loved him in The Godfather Part 1 and 2, and Serpico. Bruce Dern, who would eventually be cast in the role of George, asked Alfred Hitchcock why he was cast. Hitchcock replied, because Mr. Packenow wanted $1 million, and Hitch doesn't pay $1 million. Dern eventually realised that Mr. Packenow was in fact Al Pacino. Other stars considered to play George were Jack Nicholson, but he was doing the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at that time. Bruce Dern was hired to play George and turned out to be perfect for the role. Dern had originally worked with Hitchcock playing a sailor in a flashback sequence in the film Marnie in 1964, and he had appeared in an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Dern would say about Hitchcock, he noticed everything, a shadow on the performer's face, a few seconds too long on a take. Just when we thought he had no idea what was going on, he'd snap us all to attention with the most incredible awareness of some small but disastrous detail that nobody would have noticed until it got on screen, and then he'd be bored again. The shooting process would always be the most boring process for Hitchcock, as he enjoyed preparing a film in pre-production more than actually filming a movie. For the part of Blanche, Hitchcock looked at Beverly Sills and Goldie Hawn, but he chose actress Barbara Harris. Hitchcock enjoyed working with Harris immensely and was delighted with her in the role of Blanche. For the part of Arthur's lethal girlfriend, Fran, Faye Dunaway was approached for the role. The role went to Karen Black, who initially wanted the role of Blanche. Karen Black would receive top billing, even though she had the least screen time of the 4 lead actors, which was probably because she was the most well known. For the role of Julia Rainbird, Kathleen Nesbitt was cast. Nesbitt was 88 at the time of being cast. Ed Lauter, known character actor, was cast as Joseph Maloney. As it turns out, Hitchcock was very impressed with Lauter and had wanted him to star in his follow-up movie, titled The Short Night. But due to Hitchcock's ailing health, the film was never made. Universal chose not to film the script with another director. For most of Hitchcock's films, he often specified where the story's location was by using on-screen titles or using recognizable landmarks. Films like North by Northwest with Mount Rushmore would specify the location with the landmark, but in Family Plot, he would deliberately leave the story's location unspecific, using sites in both San Francisco and Los Angeles. The movie's famous car chase sequence was filmed at Universal Studios in the backlot. This scene was technically not a car chase because it only featured one car going downhill.
I might go back to that car chase for a moment. At what point did you decide to have the emphasis more on the humor than the terror, or the potential terror in that scene?
I think the humor emerged through the players, actually. It's a very fine line between humor and tragedy. But really what that car chase did, it combined both elements, danger, humor, and the thrill of the thing.
John Russell Taylor, in his book Hitch, The Life and Times of Alfred Hitchcock, called the scene a runaway car ride. The restaurant used in the film was built on the backlot and was shown on studio tours in 1975. Henry Bumstead, production designer on the film, said that the cemetery scene in the movie was Hitchcock's favourite location. The cemetery was made in the movie to look weedy, with long grass. The cemetery was paid by the production company to let the grass and weeds grow for a whole 4 months without weeding or maintenance. Shooting would be delayed for 1 week, from May the 5th to May the 12th of 1975, due to extra costume and makeup tests. In Family Plot, there are some obvious references to other Hitchcock films, like Blanche's Home, which is near an intersection with Bates Street, an obvious reference to Psycho. Hitchcock's signature cameo is seen 40 minutes into the film. In this cameo, he appears in a silhouette through a glass door of the Registrar of Births and Deaths during production. Alfred Hitchcock was apparently not happy with Karen Black, and would often hint to co-star William Devane that he would be cutting her scenes by making a neck-cutting gesture to him. Cinematographer Leonard South said of working with Hitchcock on Family Plot, "He asks what lens you have on the camera, then he looks at the scene and he knows what will appear on the screen. He's rarely wrong, and he never moves the camera without a reason. When it moves, it's because the audience should be looking around with the actors. He's very specific about that." In the final shot, we see Hitchcock breaking one of the rules of filmmaking by having Barbara Harris's character look straight into the camera and wink at the audience. This was not planned, but Alfred Hitchcock decided to leave it in. Family Plot was screened at the 1976 Cannes Film Festival, but was not entered into the main competition. For the score, Universal's music executive Harry Garfield would recommend John Williams to Hitchcock following the Oscar and critical acclaim of the music score for Jaws. Hitchcock would often give the composer suggestions, like the scene where Maloney suddenly disappeared from Adamson's office.
There was a room where the criminal had been, and the camera pans to the window, which is open, and the curtains blow in the breeze, and this reveal of the camera tells us the criminal has escaped.
Hitchcock suggested that Williams stop the music when the camera cuts to the open window, which indicates to the audience that Maloney has left through it. Williams saw it as a great honour and privilege working with the director. Family Plot was well received by critics on its release. Some called the film a witty, relaxed lark, and would add that it was certainly Hitchcock's most cheerful film in a long time, but it's hardly innocent. Roger Ebert would call it a delight for two contradictory reasons: because it's pure Hitchcock, with its meticulous construction and attention to detail, and because it's something new for Hitchcock, a macabre comedy, essentially. He doesn't go for shock here, or for violent effects, but for the gradual tightening of a narrative noose. The film also contained the classic screwball comedy elements, and may also evoke memories of Hitchcock's film Mr. and Mrs. Smith from 1941. Barbara Harris was nominated for Best Actress in a Motion Picture Comedy or Musical at the 34th Golden Globe Awards. Sadly, this was Hitchcock's final film before his death at age 80 on April the 29th of 1980. Family Plot is a suspenseful, funny film done in classic Hitchcock fashion. The scenes are masterfully filmed, and the film shows great chemistry between Harris and Dern. It doesn't hold its place as one of Hitchcock's best films, but it still holds up, and is definitely one of the best films of 1970s cinema. The film has that definite Hitchcock touch that we lovers of film hold so close to our hearts. My name's Jonathan. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and like what you see on my channel, please subscribe, and if you would like to become a patron on my Patreon, click on the link below.